All right, let's move on to the next part of the episode where I talk about Sunni leadership and the critique from these Shia that, well, why are the Sunnis not doing jack? Why is it just the Shia groups that are attacking Israel and defending Palestinians? The Sunnis aren't doing anything. And this is a point of great self-consciousness. You could even say humiliation for a lot of Sunnis. And that's part of the emotional reaction, unfortunately, where Sunnis will say, well, Iran's not doing anything. Hezbollah's not doing anything. It's just fireworks shows. It's just the Houthis aren't doing anything. It's just fireworks. This is kind of like an ego defense mechanism to cope with the fact that you don't have Sunni groups that are doing the same thing or anything close to that. But we have to put emotion aside. That's been my consistent message to Muslims, is that let's put emotion aside. Let's judge things in a fair and just way. Let's judge things according to the reality. But still, we have this question of Sunni failure. And, you know, we'll just say it what it is. It is a failure, but it's a failure because of certain plots and campaigns that have been waged against Sunnis. And so there are two components that I'm going to talk about. There are external factors, and then there are internal factors. First, let's talk about the external factors. One of the main reasons that we don't have Sunni groups that are attacking Israel is that Israel and the United States have dedicated so much energy to neutralize any kind of anti-Zionist Sunni movement. And the thing is that any anti-Zionist Sunni movement has also been Islamist. So the main example is Ikhwan al-Muslimin, the Muslim Brotherhood. So as you know, I have my critique of the Muslim Brotherhood. I have my critique of their scholars. I have a critique of their wasatiyah, like their reformist kind of liberalized Islam. Like it's a kind of a conservative Islam. Like that's deviance. We can critique them. But Ikhwan al-Muslimin is Islamist. They want government that is informed by Islam, and they're also anti-Zionism, pro-Palestinian. So Israel and the United States have dedicated so much resources and so much time to neutralizing Ikhwan al-Muslimin and basically wiping them out, basically ensuring that they have no influence, whether it's in Saudi, whether it's in Jordan, whether it's in other countries in the region. Neutralizing Ikhwan al-Muslimin, neutralizing any kind of Islamism. So even if you're not Ikhwan al-Muslimin, but you have this kind of Islamism just means that you want Islamic government. You want an Islamic government, that means you're Islamist. Technically, all Muslims should be Islamists. But unfortunately, there is secularization. Much of the Muslim world has been secularized. But the point is that any kind of Islamist group or movement, Sunni group, has been attacked, has been neutralized. And there's been so much effort from governments, from these Sunni governments, to internally quell and internally sabotage any kind of Sunni Islamic revival because they view it as a threat. Contrast this with Iran. Iran has done the opposite. Iran itself, the regime is an Islamist regime. Again, there's many criticisms. They're basically conservatives. They're deformist. Even put aside their Shiism. But even in terms of their vision of what is an Islamic state, it's not, authentic Islam. It's a modernized, liberal version of Islam with kind of constitutional democracy. That's really what they have implemented in Iran as well. So that can be critiqued. But it's still, Islam is informing the government there. Islam is informing the government, and they're anti-Zionist, pro-Palestinian. So they don't have the same kind of pressure to quell Islamism internally within Iran, because that's what the government is. When they don't expend that kind of energy internally, they have a lot more resources and energy and attention to spend externally. So what Iran does is it empowers and it funds and it arms other Shi'i Islamist groups in the Middle East. That's been their whole strategy. Why? Because their main opponent, which is Israel and the United States, does the opposite. What Israel and the United States do is they arm these extremist groups, these extremist Sunni groups like ISIS, in order to attack not only other Sunnis, but also Iran. That's been their strategy, is to foment civil war and extremism. And this is, again, part of the Yunon plan that we've discussed over and over and over again on many episodes of Haqiqatjou. So to counter that, Iran has done the opposite. Okay, we're going to arm and fund the Shi'i groups, the Shi'i Islamist groups. Obviously, the U.S. not only funds the extremists, but the Sunni extremists, but they also fund the secularists. And they empower the secularists, these tyrants, to clamp down on the Sunni population, on the pious, the religious groups. So Iran's strategy has been to counteract, and they have the resources, they have the time and energy and the attention to spread, to arm the Houthis, to arm Hezbollah, to arm Iraqi Shi'i groups. And now there was news that even in Saudi, there is a new group that has launched 2 drones at Israel. And it also turns out to be a Shi'i group in Saudi. And I don't know what the Saudi government is going to do about that, but this was also announced that they launched 2 drones, and they posted the video on Twitter. So this is Iran backed. Now imagine if the Sunni states had this same strategy. Imagine if the Sunni states, rather than repressing their Sunni religious population, repressing the Islamist attitudes of their population, they adopted Islamism. They became more Islamic. They started promoting Sunni Islamism in the region. They would be as powerful as Iran, or they could potentially get the influence and the power that Iran has. But instead, they are spinning their wheels, constantly trying to repress their population. For who? For the benefit of Israel and the United States. This is the failure. It's a failure externally, because these states are just repressing the Sunni population. That's the explanation. That's part of the explanation. Then you get into other specific internal factors, because you have madkhaliism, you have sectarianism, this kind of Salafi, but also sometimes Sufi sectarianism. That also saps the energy of Sunnis, because they're constantly infighting. They're constantly infighting, they're constantly undermining each other, they constantly are takfiring each other. Sunnis takfiring Sunnis. Forget about like alliance with the Shia. Forget about that aspect. They are takfiring other Sunnis. Like, oh, you're an Ash'ari, you are at minimum a deviant. You're a Sufi, you're at minimum a deviant, and also likely you could be a kafir. Therefore, I might as well just ally with Israel and the United States as opposed to you. You're a Mortad, as opposed to allying with Jews and Christians. So I'm going to ally with the Jews and Christians. Like, that is the internal cancer, or the internal conflict that keeps Sunnis embroiled in a civil war that saps their energy, saps their attention. And the Madkhalis, which we've covered, maybe you've seen the video that we published, Judeo-Muslims. We published that a couple of days ago. Go watch that if you haven't. Their whole job is to create as much disunity and conflict among Sunnis as possible. That's their whole job. Sectarians, same thing. Like, even if they're not technically madkhalis, like, what distinguishes madkhalis from other sectarians is that the madkhalis are just much more hardcore about never criticize the ruler, never criticize these Gulf rulers. They're, you know, we've already covered the deviance of that kind of view. These other sectarians, they're not going to be as hardcore about not criticizing the ruler, but they're equally sectarian. They're the ones who are making constant videos about, what's your aqidah, bro? What's your aqidah? What are you hiding? They're the ones who are making those videos. And again, like, the role that they play, it's being a useful idiot for Zionism. It's being a useful idiot where Sunnis can't unite to an extent where they're able to form groups that can pursue bigger projects, like establishing a Sunni revival that has political implications for the Middle East, a political revival. We can't really focus on that because we're too busy interrogating others on, what do you think about Yadullah? Like, what exactly is your understanding of Yadullah, the hand of Allah or the shin of Allah? Secondary aqidah issues. So this is an internal problem that Sunnis have, and we can't get to where we need to go until we address this problem. And I've, again, been on the tail end of this problem. I've been attacked and targeted because of these sectarians. Why do you think that is? These sectarians have attacked me, usually unprovoked. Like, I haven't specifically said anything against them. They're the ones who make videos about me over and over again. Unprovoked attack. Why? Why do you think that they're targeting me? And I tweeted about this recently that, you know, when we look at the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, they have been attacking many pro-Palestinian activists and calling them anti-Semites. But they really haven't been targeting many Muslims and Muslim religious speakers. And I'm the only exception. When it comes to American Muslim religious speakers or preachers or du'at, it's pretty much only me. I don't know anyone else that they have attacked. Why? Why am I like a target? And I'm not trying to praise myself, but it's a question that I ask myself. Like, am I alone? Like, is there not other speakers or du'at that are launching these types of critiques or making these kinds of claims? What have I been talking about for the past year? For the past year, I've had two main issues. One is Judaism/Zionism, critiquing that ideology, critiquing that religion and how it lends itself or leads to or drives ethnic cleansing of Palestinians and the horrors and the atrocities that we see within Palestine. That's been the first focus. And the second focus has been the need for Muslims to get their act together, specifically by allying with each other, forming alliances with different groups, most importantly, alliances with other Muslim groups. So we should bridge the gap and cooperate and ally with Shia. We should cooperate and ally with those from different manahij, aqa'id, different aqidah schools, and work towards a bigger goal. Those are my two main messages. And both of these are antithetical to Zionism, contrary to the interests of the Israeli state. And that's why the ADL, which is tied directly to the Israeli government, has been targeting me and has multiple articles on me, tweets on me, and they've been working very hard to try to deplatform me. So, but this is, why am I alone? That's my question. Like, why am I? Where are the other speakers? Where are the other du'at? And the answer is pretty simple. The other speakers aren't talking about these two issues. Other speakers will talk about the atrocities that Israel commits. Other speakers will talk about political Zionism is a problem. That's good, at least. You know, at least they're doing that. But they're not necessarily talking about unity. with other Muslims, and they're not talking about Judaism, and they're not really talking about how Judaism and Zionism is this wider ideology, and what are the specifics of that ideology that leads to committing genocide against Palestinians. They don't talk about those topics. Why? Because of pressure from the ADL, pressure from these Zionist groups to deplatform, to demonetize, to basically cancel you. That's my analysis. Maybe you have a different analysis, but I want to substantiate this. I want to substantiate this claim. And we need to investigate more clearly, because this is a scandal. As far as I'm concerned, this is a scandal. Instead, you have like even masajid, you have mosques that are putting their imams on probation or firing their imams or their khatibs if they make any statements against Judaism as a religion or against certain Jewish beliefs. These are beliefs that are directly implicated or directly involved in driving many of the actions of Jews in Israel and the Israeli state overall. So shouldn't they be critiqued by Muslims? These groups, these Zionist groups, have no problem critiquing Islam. They have no problem opening the Quran, opening Hadith, and spewing all kinds of lies, anti-Islam lies about our religion. And they do it openly. And in fact, their trash is boosted by the algorithms on YouTube and Twitter and elsewhere. Someone like Ben Shapiro, who does critique Islam and does critique Muslim immigration and Muslim immigrants, and puts out all of these racial caricatures, puts out all of anti-Islam anti-Islam bile, he gets boosted by YouTube. He gets boosted by the algorithms. But a Muslim khatib in his local mosque can't like have a critique of Judaism and how it's connected to what the Zionist state is doing to Palestinians, when even the leader, the prime minister of Israel, is quoting the Bible and is invoking religious principles and doctrines like Amalek. You can't talk about that as an imam. And it's the masjid board that's firing you, or sometimes is reporting you. Sometimes the masjid board is reporting their imam. This is a case that I heard about, but I haven't got a chance to look into it, in the UK, where a imam was reported to the Home Office or to counter-terrorism office or whatever. I forgot the details, because he said, you know, he narrated a hadith or a verse of the Quran about Christians and Jews. He's an extremist. Do you see like the two levels of incompetence? One, the religious leadership is not addressing the systematic problem with Zionism, with Judaism, and how those operate to create the situation that we're in now. Not only when it comes to what's happening in Palestine, but also how governments are being manipulated to censor and to deplatform and to even get into legal trouble Muslims and pro-Palestinian activists in the West. There's not an effort to counter that. There's not an effort to analyze that, investigate that, strategize about that. That in itself is such a massive failure and such a massive dereliction of duty that it's hard to overstate it. But not only is there that failure, but we're also reporting ourselves. We're also reporting ourselves and accusing each other of being anti-Semitic and being radicals because we have this kind of pro-Palestinian activism. The few imams who dare to open their mouths, the few imams who dare to say something about the bigger picture, they are getting shut down. They're getting fired. This is happening in Sunni mosques, in the Sunni Muslim community. So this is another part of the problem. You have madkhalis. We can all dunk on madkhalis all day long. It's fun. Sectarians, yeah, now we're getting to more familiar with what these sectarians are actually doing. They're trying to rip apart the Muslim community whether it's for their ego, whether it's for their, you know, they want to just puff out their chest and dunk on Sufis or dunk on Salafis or whatever, and they want to dedicate themselves to that. And then ultimately that lends itself to the Zionist project. Okay, whatever. We're getting to learn that. But what about the Sunnis that don't fall into those two categories? Even they are ineffective, or they're being actively silenced. That is a scandal. That is a scandal, and we have to call it out. And that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do more and more. Because what is the real problem here is cowardice. We have cowards. We have people, Sunnis, who are acting like cowards. They are not saying what they need to say. Okay, fine. Like, we can't change things with our hands because literally we will be, you know what's going to happen. We can't travel. We can't move around. We can't do anything in that way. But we can speak. We can organize. We can create systems. We can create programs. We can create projects, especially in the West. Especially in the West, where we can influence politics. That's the claim that's always made, that Muslims need to get involved with politics. Oh, okay, how do we get involved in politics? Oh, just vote for Ilhan Omar. Vote for Ilhan Omar and vote for Rashida Tlaib and any kind of like hijabi that comes on the ballot, vote for her. That's how, or non-hijabi, just vote for her. We need to fundraise and be so proud when they get elected to Congress. Like that's the extent of political vision when it comes to the Muslim community in the West. And there's literally not even an idea or a sense of what politics can mean outside of that. Like, that's how illiterate the community is. I'm going to be frank, you know, I'm going to be very frank with you, and it's going to be bitter medicine, but you need to hear it. We don't even have the idea of a think tank. We don't even have the idea of a think tank. And I have to say this over and over and over again. Why is there not a Muslim think tank in the West that is dedicated to the cause of Islam? A religious think tank. Why does that not exist? That is a huge scandal. That is a huge failure. We have Muslims involved in think tanks, but the problem is those think tanks aren't dedicated to the cause of Islam or the interests of Muslims. You have other religious groups have plenty of think tanks, political think tanks. Jewish groups have their think tanks, a plethora of think tanks. Hindu groups now increasingly are creating think tanks, are starting think tanks and funding it with millions of dollars. They're also getting millions of dollars from the BJP government in India to advocate for Hindu interests. Where is the Muslim think tank? And the funny, sad thing is you have all these Muslims who are like, oh, we need to establish a khilafah. We need to establish a khilafah, a caliphate. That's our goal. You can't even establish a think tank. You can't even build a think tank. Think about that, the level of failure or the level of ignorance. Like, okay, we can build masajid and we can build madrasas. Beautiful, amazing, excellent. Build more masajid, build more madaris. But what is the point of those madaris when those madaris and those masajid aren't producing Muslims that can actually move the needle politically and do something that impacts the world? Do something that impacts the world in terms of stopping genocide of Muslims, stopping the slaughter of Muslims, actually being able to counteract that. And I'll tell you why, and it's cowardice. You're spending money. If you build a think tank that's actually going to fight for Muslim interests, that's politically incorrect. That's going to be politically incorrect because we live in the secular liberal West. And a think tank that is truly dedicated to an Islamic cause and Muslim interests is going to run afoul of these governments or these political platforms. That creates conflict. We don't want conflict. We want to just be the good immigrant. We want to be the good minority. Yeah, we'll build a mosque, and the khatib will tell us all about the importance of treating women well, treating Muslim women nicely. And we'll build the madrasa, you know, make sure that the madrasa doesn't get into any kind of politics, obviously. There were, I'm being very frank with you, madrasas that recognize, yeah, this is a problem. We are teaching our students all about fiqh and all about tafsir and all about usul al-fiqh and Quran, etc., etc. Our students are learning the qira'at, but they're very uninformed. Our students are very uninformed when it comes to politics, philosophy, when it comes to these social movements, when it comes to feminism, when it comes to Zionism. We really have a lack or a gap in our educational offering on those subjects. Maybe we can have Daniel. Maybe we can have Daniel come and fill this gap, and he can, you know, give us a lecture maybe once a month. Maybe we can do that. And then what happens? It gets canceled. It gets canceled, you know, after a week without even proceeding, without even such a program starting. Why? Well, it's too controversial. Daniel is too controversial, so we can't do that. So yeah, I'm very shocked. I'm very shocked. This is not something that happened recently. This is from years ago. But that shows you the cowardice. You are not willing to confront, and you're not willing to be politically confrontational. You are not willing to politically stand for what is true because you're scared. You're scared. So if you're scared, you're going to be weak. You're going to be easily manipulated. You're going to be destroyed. And Allah is going to replace you. Allah is going to replace you as He's promised to do. So this is an institutional failure. You want khilafah, and then you have Muslims who are saying, "Oh, we need our own social media platform." They say as they type on YouTube. And then you tell them, "Why don't you subscribe to another alternative platform like Rumble?" They don't do it. They don't even bother to like download a secondary app, for example. Or to like use a VPN if you can't access it directly, to use a VPN to subscribe separately. They won't even take the time to do that. And part of the reason, I'll tell you why, they're scared that, oh, well, all of our information online is being tracked. So if I subscribe to MuslimSkeptic or I go on Rumble and I watch a video, I'm going to be put on a list. And I don't want to jeopardize being put on a list. They're scared. So, but they, you know, oh, we need a separate social media. You can't even support like a separate channel, like an alternative, a slightly politically controversial channel. You can't even support that. You can't even put your weight behind that, let alone money behind that, let alone support that. But you want like a whole social media ecosystem separate. You want like a khilafah, but you can't even support a think tank. You can't even fund a think tank or build a think tank that's actually dedicated to Islam. Yeah, these are contradictions. These are inconsistencies. And then wondering, oh, well, why are we so weak? Why are we so weak? We can't just blame everything on the tyrants. We can't just blame everything on the king of Jordan or the crown prince of whatever. Or King Fulan. We can't just blame them for everything. Some of the blame falls squarely on the Sunni Muslim population, the Sunni Muslim community. Sorry, I mean, that's bitter medicine, but it is what it is. You're not willing to sacrifice the minimum by just speaking out. You lose nothing. You lose nothing. Like if you're that scared and that fearful, then you should be written as a coward.